G'day, I'm Dr. Philip Button, food microbiologist at the Food Microbiology Academy in Melbourne, Australia. Now, during this session, I want to take you through a bit about probiotics and gut health. Now, this was actually a presentation I did at VegoFest in Melbourne last year on 20 October 2019, and it's titled A Natural Way to Get Your Dose of Good Bacteria. Now, the information that I'm going to present was actually the topic of a blog post a few months back, but what I want to go through now is actually take you through the presentation and the slides. So the first thing to keep in mind is natural. What does natural actually mean? So what's the definition of natural? So this is one definition here where it says natural is something that exists in or derived from nature, so it's not made or caused by people. Or in the context of food, something that's having had a minimum of processing or preservative treatment. Now just keep that definition in the back of your mind because it'll be a bit relevant later on. We'll revisit that. So the first thing to note, to understand though, is that microorganisms are everywhere. So you'll find them in really cold places, really hot, really dry, dark, bright, high pressure, so deep hydrothermal vents under the sea. Basically, microorganisms have colonized every conceivable habitat on this planet. And that includes us as people. So we're covered in microorganisms, inside, outside, although there are a few sterile body sites, but by and large, there are microorganisms all over us. And these are just some of the examples of some of the organs where you'll find all kinds of microorganisms. So the nose, mouth and throat, and from our point of view, most importantly, the gut, so the small intestine, large intestine, those sorts of areas. Now, bacteria can generally be classified as either good bacteria or bad bacteria, and these are some examples. So when we talk about the bad guys, these are the ones that will cause disease. So Salmonella, Streptococcus, Helicobacter, and a whole host of others, which you may have come across, especially Salmonella, because that is consistently in many countries the second most common cause of foodborne disease, with Campylobacter being the first. So how about the good guys, the good bacteria? Well, those are the ones that live inside you and are important for your good health. And these are some examples of types of good bacteria. So Lactobacillus, Bifidobacterium, as well as some types of Streptococcus. Here are some examples of what these good bacteria actually do. So these gut microbes. So if we start from the top, we can see break down food. So they contain or they can secrete various digestive enzymes which aid in the digestion process. Now, some others actually synthesize vitamins. So you can get vitamins not only from the food you eat, but from the probiotic, normal gut flora within you. Now, protect epithelial cells of the gut. That's an important aspect for host defense. So if they're protecting the epithelial cells lining your gut, that basically makes it much harder for the invading pathogenic or disease-causing microorganisms to gain a foothold or gain entry into those cells. And if they can't gain entry into the cells, well, then those pathogenic microorganisms will simply be, by and large, washed out of your gastrointestinal tract. Similar to that, we've got modulation, or more specifically, stimulation of the immune system by these gut microbes in various ways. So they're going to upregulate, certain immune cells and enable those to be more effective or more intense in their action. And though the last two examples are just two of the examples in which these gut microbes fend off the pathogenic microorganisms that may gain entry into your body. So this slide here, titled Direct Mechanisms of Colonization Resistance, refers to the direct mechanisms that the probiotic bacteria will use to resist colonization of the pathogenic microorganisms that you will intake with food. So we're talking about foodborne disease if the food is not handled properly, so meaning not subject to strict temperature control and that sort of thing, and it's contaminated. You eat the food, it's got a high level of pathogenic bacteria, and they find their way into the gut, and so that's where this diagram is at. And so how can these probiotic bacteria actually fend off these invading microorganisms to tip the balance in the way of health, rather than tipping the balance in the way in favour of disease? So adhesion exclusion is number one. You'll see on the left towards the top there. So if these probiotic bacteria are adhering, and you can see examples down there, commensal E. coli, if they're adhering to the mucus layer of the epithelial lining of the gut, that is one direct way in which they're going to exclude the colonization of these pathogens, because simply there's not going to be any way for the pathogens to, if you like, latch on to the inside of the gastrointestinal tract. Number 2 and 3 refer to nutrition. So all microorganisms, of course, just like any other living thing, need nutrients to survive. So these probiotic gut bacteria can limit carbon sources, which are vital for bacteria, which are vital for any bacteria, and they can also initiate limitations in a whole range of micronutrients. So both of these basically will starve the pathogens of the vital nutrients that they need to actually grow. So, basically the natural flora within your gut is starving the pathogens of nutrients they need. Now, if that wasn't enough, we've got 4 and 5 listed there. 4 and 5 are secretion of antimicrobials. So we're talking about antibiotics or bacteriocins as antimicrobial compounds which will attack, basically, just like antibiotics do, in disease. Basically attack the pathogens, destroy them, eliminate them, in a similar way to toxin production. So we've got number 4, secretion of antimicrobials. An example there is from lactobacillus, which can produce various bacteriocins, which are natural antimicrobials. In fact, those are so natural that some of them, niacin, for example, are considered a generally regarded as safe compound to be used in foods for the purpose of food safety, food preservation, that sort of thing. And then we've got Bacteroides as an example of a toxin-producing gut microorganism, which of course will also eliminate the pathogens, specific pathogens. Now, while all this is going on, and you've got the gut microflora, doing all these things, all these mechanisms to fend off, eliminate, stop from colonizing the gut, we've got the pathogens expressing a whole host of virulence factors to enhance their pathogenic potential. So really what you've got is a toss-up between the gut bacteria and the pathogens, and it's like, if you want to describe it that way, a bit of a war, really, a bit of a battle, a bit of a tussle between these two sets of microorganisms, and whichever wins, that is where the balance will be tipped in favour of. So if the gut bacteria win, then you will remain healthy. But if the pathogens are able to overcome these particular mechanisms of the gut bacteria, then you will fall sick. So that's some of the complex interactions that take place in the lumen of your gastrointestinal tract. So we've had a bit of a discussion on probiotic bacteria, what they can do, how important they are. And the question now is not so much should we have probiotic bacteria in our diet, but how should we have them? Because we know that they are important. They do so many good things for our body, enabling us to have such good health. So how should we get them? Well, ideally, if you can possibly do it, fermented foods is the way to go. And we've got a picture down there of some fabulous fermented vegetables that can be fermented with a whole range of different types of probiotic bacteria. Now, these can either be fermented with a proper or known starter culture, or like was done in the old days and still the way some people do it today, is simply to use the natural flora that's present on the vegetables. And so it's just basically having the right conditions and waiting for the vegetables to ferment. That's basically all that happens, unless you're adding in specific starter cultures to kickstart the fermentation process. Now, as a second choice, and a less natural way, or should I say an unnatural way, but if you can't go with the natural way of obtaining these probiotics, then it's better to take probiotic supplements than not take any at all. So that's basically how important they are. That ideally, enjoy some amazing fermented foods, amazing fermented probiotic foods. But if you can't go with this natural way, then by all means go with probiotic supplements. Now, the important thing to note, though, is that there is a difference between fermented foods and fermented foods that contain active probiotics, because there are some fermented foods that are basically, a fermented food is a food that is fermented by microorganisms. That's how these things take place. But the thing is, not all fermented foods will have, or drinks, will have a viable amount of these probiotics at the time of consumption. It's either that, or the starter cultures that are used for those fermented foods are not actually probiotic, so meaning that they can't actually bring about health benefits to the person that consumes them. So there are some foods, like kombucha, for example, is a fermented food, but it's not a probiotic. Sorry, it's a fermented drink, but it's not a probiotic drink. So that's something to keep in mind. As is soy sauce, for example. and tempeh compared to sauerkraut and kimchi, which are fermented foods which contain active probiotics at the time of consumption. However, there's another but in here. As long as they are not heat treated, after the process of fermentation, because of course fermentation takes place as a result of the activity of live microorganisms. So if you're going to have a fermentation and then you're going to heat treat that particular food instead of eating it raw, then what are you going to do? You're going to kill off all of the probiotic bacteria that are there. And if that's the case, such as sauerkraut that's in a can, which has been subjected to very high heat treatment, then in that case you're simply only going to be taking in or having an intake of the vegetables without the probiotic bacteria that we use to ferment them, which would have been killed off during the heat treatment, the intense heat process, especially the intense heat process that takes place during canning. So raw is the best way to go, and especially if you can make it yourself, then even better. So here we've got just a few more specific examples on the health benefits of what's probably the two most important, most significant from a health point of view, probiotic foods. Kimchi, the Korean delicacy, and sauerkraut, likewise a delicacy, but on the other side of the world from Germany. And you'll see some similarities in the benefits. So both of these boost the immune system, and both of them aid with digestion, but from different perspectives. So kimchi aids in digestion through through the prebiotics. Through the probiotics that are included, whereas if you look at the sauerkraut side, there's some specific benefits there from the probiotics, so enzymes and that type of thing. But what I was going to say just before was prebiotics, and there are certain foods which have certain probiotic foods that have a high degree of fiber, and those in particular are good as prebiotics. And prebiotics help probiotics. So just remember to not get those two terms mixed up. Probiotics refer to the bacteria. Prebiotics refer to the fiber constituents that will boost or beneficially aid the gut microbiome. So to wrap up, bit of a summary here on friendly bacteria and the bad guys are pathogenic bacteria. So if we start on the right hand side with the pathogenic bacteria, and we basically just to make sure, we just need to make sure that our lifestyle tips the balance and supports the friendly bacteria rather than tipping the balance in support of the bad guys, the pathogenic bacteria. So meaning, eliminate stress from our life. Sure, a lot of these things are more easy said than done, but if we can, take little steps and start working towards addressing some of these issues, which many of us have constantly got. So reducing stress, ensuring we have a good amount of sleep. Antibiotics are listed there. Not taking antibiotics unless we can absolutely, unless we absolutely need them. And when we do, make sure we follow the instructions, to a T. And food poisoning. So, making sure that we don't succumb to food poisoning by ensuring that we follow good food safety protocols in terms of good hygiene in the kitchen, not eliminating cross-contamination, not temperature abusing food by having them sitting around in the temperature danger zone, and washing our foods properly and those sorts of things. So if we address those, then we have a much less chance of getting disease, of supporting the growth, introduction and the growth of the pathogenic bacteria. Because what we really want to be doing is supporting our gut microflora. So what we can do there is, first and foremost, having a healthy diet. So what's a healthy diet? It's a diet that is rich in fruits and vegetables. And if you look at the current nutritional pyramids, suggested by nutritionists and dietitians today, what is down the bottom of the pyramid, which means it is to be consumed in the largest amount, are fruits and vegetables, with vegetables to be consumed in a larger proportion than fruit. So if you have a diet rich in fruit and vegetables, a well-balanced diet that's rich in fruit and vegetables, and you include fermented foods in your diet as well, not only from the point of view of probiotics, but from the point of view of the many other health benefits that fermented foods can afford you. And if you can't do that, then by all means take a probiotic supplement. But it's just a much better option and a much tastier option too, to simply go for fermented foods as your source of probiotics. And that wraps up our talk on probiotics and gut health. So I hope you've learned something. I hope you've been inspired to look more into how you can support your friendly bacteria. So that's Philip Button signing out. Have a good day and take care, folks. Bye.